Welcome to the New Hampshire Institute of Politics, everyone. This is New Hampshire's home for politics. I want to welcome you all here tonight. As many of you know, this building has had more presidential activity in it going into the November election than any other place in the United States, and we're particularly proud of that. We have about 6 to 8 big events in this room a week, and I want to say that this is the first time I've ever seen our guest speaker putting out more chairs, and I honor you for doing so. That was a great We have our student Tom Snow here for the purposes of introductions. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Thomas Snow, and I'm a Kevin Harrington Student Ambassador. On behalf of the faculty, staff, students at the New Hampshire Institute of Politics at St. Anselm College, I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining us at this evening's event. The Institute's mission is to engage, educate, and empower citizens of all ages to actively participate in the civic and political life of their communities and strengthen democracy. The Institute is nonpartisan and does not endorse political issues or candidates. Before we begin this evening's program, I would just like to remind you to please turn off all cell phones or other devices that make noise. Also, following Mr. Walker's remarks, we'll have a brief question and answer period. Tonight we have joining us the Honorable David Walker, founder of the Comeback America Initiative. The Comeback America Initiative, or CAI, seeks to promote fiscal responsibility and sustainability by engaging the public and assisting key policymakers on a nonpartisan basis to help achieve solutions to America's federal, state, and local fiscal imbalances. Before assuming his current position as Chief Executive Officer of CAI, Dave served as the 7th Comptroller General of the United States and head of the U.S. Government Accountability Office. In addition to this, Dave has over 20 years of public sector experience and most recently served as President and CEO of the Peter G. Peterson Foundation. Dave is with us tonight to kick off his 10 Million a Minute bus tour, an initiative that plans to educate the public and offer a facts-based view of the American economy. His visit and viewpoints contrast both presidential candidates' visits to New Hampshire today, and Dave is also considered the most popular write-in candidate for the upcoming election. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. David Walker.
Tom, thanks to you. Neil, thanks to you. Thanks to the New Hampshire Institute of Politics. We'll put some more chairs out to the extent that we need to. Welcome, everybody. We're going to turn this off. I'm going to come back to this later so you'll understand what this is and what the significance of it is. A couple of key points before I get started. In addition to having been Comptroller General of the United States, when Bill Clinton appointed me into that position in 1998, I served in that position for 10 years. I also ran the Employee Benefit Security Administration, the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation. I was a trustee of Social Security and Medicare from 1990 to 1995. I've been a political independent for the last 10 years and proud of it because I don't think either party has been responsible with regard to these issues. Let me ask, as we start out, how many people went and heard Senator Sanders before this? Okay, let me briefly talk about that. First, I have great respect for Senator Sanders because he's a United States Senator elected by the people of Vermont, and anybody that can achieve that deserves respect. Every president deserves respect. The first 20 minutes of what he said, I agree with 95%. Both political parties are responsible for where we are. Things spun out of control starting in 2003. George W. Bush was fiscally irresponsible, the most in the history of the United States, but quite frankly, we still got a problem and it hadn't gotten any better. On the other hand, George H.W. Bush, 41, and Bill Clinton were very fiscally responsible. So this is not a partisan issue. It is not a personal issue. However, the last 20 minutes of his talk were filled with inaccuracies. and assertions about what we believe or what I believe. I am not in the top 1% and probably never will be. When we had the housing crisis that happened, my daughter lost a job and a lot of her mental health. My son lost a house, and I lost most of my net worth. I have spent 15 years in public service, 20 in the private sector, and now 4.5 in the nonprofit sector. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you the facts, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And everything that I give you in the first 15 minutes is going to be based on official government reports. We don't make up any of this. It's either the Government Accountability Office, the Congressional Budget Office, the trustees of Social Security and Medicare, the Chief Actuary of Social Security and Medicare, the International Monetary Fund, authoritative sources. You get the facts, then I'm going to answer questions for a few minutes, and then I want to spend most of the time talking about possible nonpartisan solutions that should be able to gain bipartisan support. And I want to hear your opinion on those. Now, this is obviously not a representative group. You chose to be here. Some people may have encouraged you to be here. But I want to hear from you on some of these reform options, and I'm glad that we've got people of all ages, because this is an issue of importance to all ages. We want to avoid intergenerational conflict, but there are very big intergenerational issues here. Let me, if I can, start. These are fact-based. In 1912, the U.S. government was 2% of the U.S. economy. And the way you judge the size of government is not how much it taxes, not how many employees it has, not how many regulations it issues, but how much does it spend as a percentage of the economy. It was 2%. Last year, 24. It's headed to 37 by 2040, absent a change in course. In 1912, the U.S. Congress controlled 97% of federal spending. The only thing that it didn't control was interest. Now, frankly, we didn't have a whole lot of debt back then as a percentage of the economy. And they don't control interest rates. So you can't control that. You got to pay what the market says. This year, it only controlled 33%, and it's going down. Now, here's what's interesting. Of the 33%, that's all of the express and enumerated responsibilities envisioned by the Founding Fathers in the Constitution, and all investments in young people, and all investments in our future. So the government's gotten bigger. They've lost control of the budget. More and more is for consumption. More and more is frankly, for seniors, of which I'm 60, I will admit. Less and less is for investment, and less is for young people. This is where the money goes. The largest program, Social Security, very important program. It's not just retirement income. It's also disability. It's also survivors. Very important program. The second largest program is a combination of Medicare and Medicaid, and the third largest is national defense. Now, this is spending and revenues adjusted for inflation since 1912, 100 years ago. And the bars are spending, the line is revenue. If the bars are above the line, that means it's a deficit. If the line's above the bar, which didn't happen very often, although it did happen 4 times, within the last 15 years, then that's called a surplus. You can see that spending is a bipartisan problem. And it really spun out of control starting in 2003. And by the way, those were the 3 things that Senator Sanders mentioned. I agree with them wholeheartedly. All 3 of the things that happened in 2003 were irresponsible individually. Collectively, they were reprehensible. And the Republicans controlled the House, the Senate, and the White House. On the other hand, there have been some irresponsible things that have happened before and after that, which we can talk about. This is debt as a percentage of the economy. Debt to GDP, gross domestic product. Believe it or not, there's only one time in the history of the United States that we had debt over 100% of the economy. Not to win our independence, not in the War of 1812, not in the Civil War, not in the Great Depression, not in World War I, only at the end of World War II until today. We now have debt over 100% of the economy, and we're adding debt at record rates. And the problem is not where we are. The problem is where we're headed. And if you look at the red, that's where we're headed. That's called third world nation status. Third world nation status on debt to GDP. So the problem is not today's deficits. The problem is not today's debt. The problem is where we're headed. Now, this is where I want to turn this barometer back on, because how many of you are familiar with the national debt clock? All right, you've seen that. And it just crossed 16 trillion. But in reality, that lowballs the problem. Because when you take the official financial statements of the U.S. government, issued by the Treasury Department, audited by the Government Accountability Office, the trustees' reports for Social Security, Medicare, of which I used to be one, and I was the Auditor General for 10 years, when you add up all the numbers, the new four-letter word, math, just add up the numbers. This is what you get. The total liabilities, the unfunded pension, retiree health care, Social Security, Medicare, not Medicaid. This does not count Medicaid because Medicaid is dealt with differently, all right? 70 trillion, 420 billion, 759 billion, and I can't go past that because it's going up 10 million a minute, 167,000 a second. And if we end up trying to put our finances in order, which will require more revenues, among other things, if we put our finances in order, the national debt clock won't go down a dollar. Not a dollar. On the other hand, if we end up coming up with a comprehensive solution that involves both spending reduction and revenue increases and a variety of other factors, if we do that, this number could come down tens of trillions of dollars, even if people that are retired or near retirement are largely unaffected. Because what's happening right now, the most powerful force on earth, called the miracle of compounding, according to Albert Einstein, which was a fairly bright guy, the miracle of compounding is working against us. Stalemate in Washington is causing this to get worse. 14.4 billion a day. We need to make tough choices, and you'll see why. When you use honest and comparable accounting, and what time is it?
It's about 5 till.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to make your announcement next, but you did it for me. So go ahead.
Okay.
One more question. One more question.
So I have a teeny tiny point and then my question. The teeny point is that right now you said only 10% of elderly are.
I didn't say that. I think Senator Sanders said that.
Okay.
Well, I didn't
either way,
audit his
the elderly
numbers.
are a minority of the people in poverty, right? I think
They have the lowest poverty rate of any major segment. That's what I said.
Yeah.
And that's accurate.
I think one reason for that would be because they grew up in a financially secure time and were more able to save and had pensions from the places they worked, and that might not be the case in the future.
And also because of Social Security, Medicare, quite frankly.
Yes, which is great. I'm glad that they're not in poverty.
Right. No. Right.
And my question comes to your very earliest slides when you showed the amount of national debt that we had, and you showed how it spiked way up in the sky for World War II. All right, and that's understandable because we were paying for war goods, we were paying to reindustrialize the country. And then what we got for that post-industrialization that we did was years of affluence. And at the same time, we also had a tax rate of as high as 90%.
Yeah.
So shouldn't we put our money in reindustrializing our nation, making goods, because that's what that money ultimately did, and tax people who are making those surpluses so we can have a better America again?
Okay, first, let's talk about what the conditions were at the end of World War II. At the end of World War II, the United States was over 50% of global GDP. We had 16 people working for every person retired, and the dollar was as good as gold. Today, the U.S. is about 24% of global GDP and declining. We have 3 people working for every person retired, and it's going down to 2 to 1. And let's just say the dollar's not as good as gold, okay? At the end of World War II, we did several things. We invested in intellectual capital through the GI Bill. We invested in the interstate highway system, not just for commerce, but for national security reasons. We invested in the defeated powers, some of which were our allies and some of which were our enemies, in order to develop global trade. We had very pro-growth policies. We had fiscal responsibility, all right? And as a result, our debt to GDP, when you count Social Security and Medicare, went from 122% down to the 30s, and we didn't pay off a dollar of debt. Not a dollar. That's why I'm saying you got to look at the debt to GDP, not how much, not gross debt, okay? But while I agree that we need to achieve more return, a higher effective tax rate for the wealthy, how you do it matters, because keep in mind certain things, and this is particularly the case at the state level, but it's even the case at the country level. People of means have options. People of means have big options. They can have multiple residences. They can move tomorrow. They can move tomorrow, okay? We don't want them to do that. We want people to invest more in America, okay? We want people to do more here. And to get that done, when you're thinking about what you're doing with regard to tax policy, it matters, both from the corporate standpoint and the individual standpoint. Even John F. Kennedy, who I admire, said that the marginal tax rates that existed back during his term were way too high, and he cut them dramatically, all right? So, I mean, look, and keep in mind what I'm advocating is get rid of a lot of these deductions, exemptions, credits, and exclusions. Who benefits from those? Not us, the wealthy. How many of you pay something called alternative minimum tax? I do, called bait and switch surtax. I guarantee you Warren Buffett doesn't pay it. I guarantee you private equity people don't pay it, okay? My effective tax rate's a lot higher than them, all right? That's ridiculous, all right? And so we need to recognize reality. The world is a different place today. Our place in the world is very different. Thank you very much.
When you're leaving, if you could step out, and if you want to read our statement of support for the tour, there's Sharpies and a poster for New Hampshire, and we'd love for you to sign it. Thank you.